The continuation of damaging austerity measures and intolerant treatment of minorities has created a hostile environment, where upward mobility is inhibited, especially for those experiencing intersecting inequalities and their families. Restricted wealth and asset-building capacity can be traced to intersecting histories of systemic racism, e.g., segregation, redlining, exclusion from public assistance programs, sexism, colonialism, and intergenerational poverty. Given these inadequacies of the reviewed policies in addressing such inequalities, the next chapter will offer recommendations for incorporating an intersectional lens into future policy design and implementation. Recommendations will be made to offer further support to those facing oppression that is not reducible to a single category, in order to provide them with more economic stability and housing security. The policies reviewed above derive from aspects of immigration laws, housing schemes and welfare provision, and all have been created through a single-axis, ungendered, racialized perspective. The omission of multidimensionality has subordinated the most vulnerable members of society and created even tougher environments for housing security to be achieved, and an arena where existing inequalities are being constantly repeated and reinforced. The reviewed policies have identified a lack of constructive support available to the vulnerable in the UK. Furthermore, the knock-on effects of certain policies, whether related to immigration or state welfare provision, have also been identified, such as employment restriction, exclusion and confidence reduction, as well as their connection with housing security. The environmental impact of the global textile industry is hard to overstate. 1/3 of the water used worldwide is spent fashioning fabrics. For every ton of cloth produced, 200 tons of water is polluted with chemicals and heavy metals. An estimated 1 trillion kilowatt-hours of electricity powers the factories that card and comb, spin and weave, and cut and stitch materials into everything from t-shirts to towels, leaving behind mountains of solid waste and a massive carbon footprint. Where the industry is today is not really sustainable for the long term, says Shreyaskar Chowdhury, chief executive of Pratibha Syntex, a textile manufacturer based outside Indore, India. With something of an "if you build it, they will come" attitude, Mr. Chowdhury has steered Pratibha toward the leading edge of eco-friendly textile production. Under his direction, Pratibha began making clothes with organic cotton in 1999. Initially, the company couldn't find enough organic farms growing cotton in central India to supply its factories. To meet production demands, Chowdhury's team had to convince conventional cotton farmers to change the growing methods. A Civil War reenactment is in part a memorial service. It is partly, too, a leisure activity. Furthermore, most reenactors assert an educational import to the performance, and to develop their roles many pursue archival research with a rare dedication. On the other hand, Civil War reenactments are increasingly commercial spectacles, with as many as 50,000 Americans routinely gathering at or near historical Civil War battlefields in order to stage performances that purport to recreate the conflict, while hundreds of thousands more spectate. I will show how theoretical issues of authenticity arise as practical problems in the Civil War reenactment community by presenting my own observations from the 2006 Gettysburg reenactment and by relying on a number of texts produced by participant observers. In particular, I will refer to Robert Lee Hodge, who was made famous by Tony Horwitz's 1996 book, Confederates in the Attic, and who served as a kind of Virgil to the author on his journey through a Confederate Valhalla. From these sources I will argue that, living history, performances require an interpretive apparatus that takes genuine history as its authority, while remaining external to both participants and tourists, who may well be unaware of how closely their own involvement approximates genuine historical events.
People in parts of Western Africa and southwestern Asia were the first to realize that the dark silvery rocks poking out of the earth could be worked into tools and weapons, sometime around 1500 BC, evidence shows. The metal was probably discovered there by accident when some ore was dropped into a fire and cooled into wrought iron, historians think. The Eureka moment didn't reach Europe for another 500 years, traveling slowly north and west through Greece, Italy, Central Europe and finally to the British Isles with the spread of the famous Celtic tribes. The Celts diffused iron technology over much of the continent through warfare, where their victory was assured due to the circumstances' strength of iron weapons. Perhaps not the most peaceful of cultural exchanges, but where the technology did travel, it caught on fast. Iron made life a lot easier in those days, when just living to the age of 45 was a feat. By that time, much of Europe had settled into small village life, toiling the soil with bronze and stone tools.